I am obsolete.
You are not.
Yes, Liam, it is raining. We're live.
Now
Sun's out up here.
Okay, we're live. All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could you please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
And to
Which it stands,
One
one nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So funny when you have echo. No. Okay, so Joan, I'm going to have you stand up and do the oath of office for general board member. Do you have the words on your computer that you can read?
Yes. I need to have my computer with me. Can you see me?
Yes.
This is like really, here, how's that? I, Joan Hallett Valentine, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties as general board member of the Board of Education according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
And you're next.
see if I can do just as well.
Damn.
I, Daniel Marvin, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties as General Board Member of Education according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Another first.
Right? Okay, so the next thing that's on the agenda is I need a motion to nominate somebody as the president of the Board of Education. Can I have a motion, please?
I motion Rick Preston.
Second.
Anyone else? Anyone else want to nominate anyone else? Can I have a vote, please?
I'm on the phone.
Can I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, well, congratulations, Rick.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Rick.
Confidence, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you in now?
Traditional
I will
one.
do it the traditional way because I can't over there. I
I,
state your name.
Richard Preston,
Do solemnly
do
swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New York,
of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties as
the duties as
President of the Board of Education
Board of Education
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations, Rick.
Thank
Go,
you.
Rick.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you for your
Rick.
service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now you continue.
Yes. Yep.
Geez, sorry.
Yep. Now you're on.
I wasn't prepared tonight.
You are more prepared than that.
All right, next up is a motion to nominate a vice president to the board. May I have a recommendation, please?
I recommend Daniel Marvin.
I second that.
Nominate someone?
I think it froze.
What happened?
I think my screen froze, so I didn't hear
Did
any,
everyone-
I didn't hear anybody.
Did you hear?
Oh. I mean, I made a motion. I recommended and made a motion for Daniel Marvin.
Okay,
And I seconded it.
thank
Okay.
you. Are there any other nominations? If not, I will call for a vote. All in favor of Daniel Marvin for vice president?
Aye.
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 Dan, you're gonna abstain?
Yes.
5-0 against. Don't be so excited, Dan. And one abstention.
Okay, so if you'll stand on that, I'll swear you in as vice president. And you can read the same thing and just put duties as vice president.
I, Daniel Marvin, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties as Vice President of the Board of Education according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
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 And thanks.
Congratulations. Thank you again.
You.
Thank you all.
We'll give, next is for the good of the cause, Karen's just checking her email. Okay, there are no emails, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Recommended action is approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda, which are 9A, the Board of Education meeting dates, 9B, appointment of district officers, 9C, appointment of the following other positions, 9D, bonding of personnel, 9E, designations, 9F, authorizations, 10A, the meeting minutes, 12A, BOCES transportation contract, 12B, BOCES cooperative purchasing participation, 12C, the cell phone approval, and 12E, special education. May I have a motion to accept this list of consent items?
Yes.
Second.
Second.
That was Colleen and Martha.
Colleen and Martha, thank you. Any discussion? These used to take us between 20 and 25 minutes to work our way through, so thanks to the consent agenda, they're just regular housekeeping items. So, all in favor, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes 6-4-0 against. Superintendent's report.
Okay, I would like to talk about two main items tonight. I thought I would start with the conclusion to graduation. So 2 weeks ago, or almost 2 weeks ago, we had the pleasure of hosting our graduation outside. The school board was well represented by our president, Rick, our vice president, Dan, and by Jeff Brownell. We had an outdoor ceremony with parents and students sitting outside with cars in the back. And it was about as good as you get in the middle of a global pandemic. So I thought I would follow up with that by talking about the kids on the stage and provide you with a summary of our graduates. So I'm going to share my screen and take a look at, let's see now. Hold on a second here. And if you would take a look, I've put a document on there called the LPHS Class of 2020 Graduation Ceremony. And I, of course, can't quite find it yet, so forgive me. Let's see.
Well, you're searching.
Yes, please.
What it happened to be my celebration of, I don't know how many years, too many, but it was interesting, the email chain from our class president, Bob Perkins, sent out to the class of our class and the class behind us, 75 and 76, and there was just a barrage of follow-up emails and Facebook listings of how great it was, the outdoor celebration. It was watched around the country by several of the classmates. So thanks to everyone who is responsible for putting that on.
Great. So I provide you with this document, and I'm just going to talk about it a little bit and let you know in general what it says. This document is very similar to documents you've seen in the past, providing a summary of our students in, numbers, data. This past graduation ceremony recognized 43 students. And that's what that top number is. Now, when I say recognize, that includes students who received diplomas, that includes Regis diplomas, advanced designation diplomas, local diplomas, as well as students who received career development, the CDOS, the Career Development and Occupational Studies Certificate. So there were 40 students who received diplomas on that stage, and 2 students who received a CDOS. We did have an international student on that stage, and that's what that additional number is. Of those students, 20, now I'm down here, 20 of them received a Regents diploma, 4 a local diploma, and 16 a Regents with advanced designation. When you look at those documents, I provide you with some additional notes if you want to know what those kinds of things mean. But that means that 40% of our students graduated with advanced designation. That's higher than usual, and that's something to note. I want to point out that our anticipated New York State graduation rate, and this is anticipated because the state did not put out this number for a long time, probably about another 9 months. So I'm digging into the data and trying to do a little guesswork. I'm anticipating we're going to have an 88% anticipated New York State graduation rate. And you might ask why that is, because typically our graduation rate is above 90%. It's because when New York State calculates graduation rates, it doesn't include students with disabilities who receive a credential other than a diploma. So we do have students who received credentials that were not a diploma, students with disabilities in that case. And so those students don't count towards a graduation rate, which I've always thought is not a very accurate statement, because I think when students with disabilities receive a CDOS diploma, it's a real success. But the state of New York doesn't report it that way. So when you see it reported, you'll see that about 88% of our students likely met that graduation rate. And when you look at this, what you're actually looking at is a percentage of what they call the cohort. And that means the group of students who started high school in 9th grade, and as of June 26th, what was the outcome? So for students who didn't finish school but are still enrolled, and we do have some students in that situation as well, they won't count towards your graduation rate. But again, those students still have an opportunity to earn a diploma in August or in January or next June. And then it also does include students who have dropped out, who have left school and not returned. And we do have 1 student in that situation. So that's why those numbers look the way they do. 95% of our 43 students received diplomas, 88% graduation rate, 5% CDOS, 40% Regents with advanced designation, 50% Regents diploma. 2 international student completers. Interesting, one of those students not only was here just for the year as an international student, but also managed to earn a Regents diploma, which is pretty tough because it means you have to navigate the New York requirements, including the exams and including the coursework. So that caught my attention. And then on top of that, this last number here, technical endorsement. So technical endorsement doesn't represent necessarily a diploma, but what it does represent is students achieving a particular standard in their courses, in this case at the Adirondack Ed Center. So whether students taking natural resources conservation, or whether they're taking automotive, whether they're doing culinary, they've met this in technical endorsement. So not every student who attends these career courses at the Adirondack Ed Center earns a technical endorsement. Matter of fact, it's a minority of the students that do. But in our case, 11 students did. That's 28%. That's probably not a very good percentage to look at, because it really should be what percentage of students who attended the Adirondack Ed Center. So it's a much higher percentage of our students who are receiving technical endorsements than you might think otherwise. But 11 of our students did receive the technical endorsement. I know our board does support career coursework in high school. And so I think that it's important for you to take a look, not just at how many students enroll in those courses, but also how do those students do. And this technical endorsement is a really good indicator of how they do. So that's the graduation numbers, percentages. And then in terms of the future plans, this is always based on what students tell us and what where they're headed for. So based on that information, you could have seen that in the commencement program as well. 40% of our graduates indicate that they're planning to attend four-year colleges, 19% two-year colleges, 5% to students who are headed to the military. They're signed and headed for basic over the summer. And then 12 of our students, and that's a pretty high number, and it really does match pretty closely those technical endorsements. 12 of our students say they're heading straight for employment. And that's 28% of the class. And then finally, there's 4 students who talk about a gap year. And if you're not familiar with gap years, this is a term that has become much more popular over the last 10, 15 years. This is a student who makes a choice to step away from school for a year with the intent of returning to school later, often after a year. The idea being to explore the world a little bit, explore themselves a little bit, so that when they do start school, college, community college, whatever it might be, technical school, they're going with a better understanding of themselves and motivated to do the best they can do. So,
Roger, isn't it
Yes.
possible then that 4 of the students in the employment category are probably the gap year students that are taking a year to work before they go to college as well?
no, so I made sure I didn't duplicate there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's 4 separate from the employment. And you're right, though, that when a student says they're going into employment, that doesn't mean that they're not. Maybe a year from there going off to school. And when a student says they're doing a gap year, that does not mean that they're not working right away after high school. Yes, these are not quite so clear categories. So that's a good idea of how maybe in real life this plays out. But I did count these students separately. So if those numbers add up to, if those percentages add up to 100, I did a pretty good job. If we're off by 1, it's just the rounding error, but it does attempt to account for all the students.
No, it's really clear, Roger. I know that listening to just different students, parents of students in the area, that this year there's a higher percentage of students that are just waiting a year to go to college because the parents want to get their money's worth and not sure what's going to take place on many campuses across the country in the fall, that
Right.
a lot of students are deferring for a year.
Yeah. Right. It's not over yet, is it? Right. So,
Roger, I have a question about the Regents diplomas.
yes.
Where is that, I know when many moons ago when I went to school, there was a lot of emphasis on the Regents diploma. I'm just curious, are our numbers, is that where we should be? Are we where do we compare with the rest of the state of percentage of students getting the Regents diploma?
Yeah.
And how important is it anymore?
Yeah. So, and I'll share with you some comparative information at another date. This is just real quick after graduation. So when you were in high school, the Regents diploma was considered the college preparatory diploma. In other words, and in a standard way, that meant that students were taking 3 years of complex math through Algebra 2. They were taking up to at least 3 years of foreign language and science at a high level, typically biology or science, chemistry, at least often physics, right? So the terminology has changed. What was a Regents diploma is now really shifted and titled to the Regents with Advanced Designation. So this one up here, this Regents with Advanced Designation, now reflects what used to be called a Regents diploma.
Okay.
So that 40% means that students have met what would be sort of a traditional four-year college entrance requirement. Now, if you want to look at down below from the regions with advanced designation down to the 10 four-year colleges, you can see it's a very similar percentage, right? So 40%, there is some rounding going on here.
Okay, yeah.
But so those students who are earning the regions with advanced designation are going off and typically planning to go to four-year college. In terms of the numbers, this is a little higher than the state average by a little bit.
Okay.
It's in the 30s, and this one's 40.
Oh,
This
perfect.
is a pretty small class, so you know, one or two students here or there does make a big difference. So you know, it's harder to compare that to maybe our classes in the past of like having 60s, mid-60s kinds of kids. But yes, that's
Sure.
yeah. Other questions or comments? All right. So I'm going to stop that share. And that's on board docs for you to take a look at. Also on board docs, and I'm not going to put it up here, is a much longer document, which starts out with an agenda and goes on to about a 6-page draft of our reopening plan. So I wanted to share with you that this week, matter of fact, it was earlier today, we held our first district reopening committee meeting. And this is the meeting to discuss our draft plan for reopening school in September, and then to map out our next steps for how to move forward in this planning process. So you've got that agenda, you've got that plan. You can kind of see what we talked about. I'm not going to go over the whole thing in great detail. But a couple of things I just want to make sure I mention. First of all, and I know we were talking about this a little bit before the meeting, I'll say it again. There are some caveats to planning right now. Now it is first, second week in July, which means, you know, really September is around the corner. You would like to think that we could have everything mapped out, ready to go. Unfortunately, there are some barriers right now to us being able to put together a plan where we can actually say for sure what we're going to do. First, we know that the executive department in the state of New York has a very strong opinion about what schools are going to do, and they have not told us yet, right? So we know we're going to get informed of whether or not schools can reopen or whether or not schools cannot reopen, similar to what happened in the spring. And so we don't have an answer to that yet. And we do hear from our governor on a regular basis that he's not ready to come up with an answer for that. So, so that's one caveat. We don't know yet what the directive from Albany will be. Number two, we are supposed to be putting together a plan based on guidance being provided by, again, our friends in Albany and different departments, in this case, probably the Department of Health. However, we haven't received that guidance yet either. So we've been told that we have to submit a plan soon, and that plan needs to be based on guidance, but we don't have the guidance yet. We've been promised, even yesterday, I promised it's coming soon, but it isn't here yet. So we're planning, I won't say in the dark, because our eyes are wide open and we're all very well aware of what some of the big issues are out there, but it is a little bit murky because we don't know what the guidance will say, and we don't know what the directive will be. So we had a very fruitful conversation today. We had a meeting with a number of different stakeholder groups, and that included administrators, included teachers, included support staff, parents, and we had a student. And among the items that we discussed were, you know, what's sort of like our guiding, overarching emphasis on planning. And that means, you know, what are some of the big principles we want to follow? For example, yes, we're of course very concerned about health and safety, physical health and safety, but we're also very concerned with educational integrity, right? The quality of our educational offerings, as well as social and emotional well-being of students. And so, you know, we recognize that we need to pay attention to all these kinds of things to drive us forward. So we talked about some overarching points of emphasis. You can see what some of those are in that document. In there, we also talked about some reopening options. Now I say options, I'm not sure if we get to choose which of those options we're going to follow, but essentially there's going to be three possibilities. One is that the directive is going to be schools can't open 100% remote instruction. At that point, our plan needs to be about how we're going to do remote instruction. Now, we know we already did remote instruction. That doesn't mean we're going to do it exactly the same way. We have learned some new things. We also need to make sure that we're meeting our goals for educational integrity and that we're paying attention to students' social and emotional well-being, right? So some of this is going to have to be a little bit different. So that's one option. Another option is we're reopening 100%. And then at that point, we have to plan for how 100% of our students are going to be educated in person, the way we're typically used to, but how we're going to adjust for the health and safety component, as well as those other concerns. And then the third one, this is the one that makes this very unique, is these hybrid options and which of those hybrid options we might follow. By hybrid options, I'm talking about partial attendance. We're talking about perhaps alternating attendance. So as an example, and there are many examples, and we have not landed on an example to make our own yet. As an example, alternating grades, attending on one day, and then being instructed remotely on the next day. So if you, for example, said K2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, on Monday, they're all coming to school and the other grades are not. On the next day, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 are coming to school and the other ones are not. That's an example. There's many examples. So we started talking about those hybrid possibilities. And again, we haven't landed on one, but we know that we have to make plans for those three possibilities: in-person, remote, and hybrid. So we will have subcommittees working on these things. Just to continue on a little bit, I'm just giving you an overview. We also discussed what resources we might need. We talked about the physical distancing rules that we'll attempt to follow. Again, real challenge in a school, especially at certain grade levels. How do you maintain 6 feet distance? But that's one of the things that we're talking about. And then we're discussing very specific points that are unique in some ways to schools that we'll have to deal with, like pickup and drop off. How do you manage that? Like hallway traffic, right? Because how do you do physical distancing if there's a lot of kids in the hallways? That's an item. Classrooms, how do you maintain social distance and good healthy environment in an enclosed classroom? And then other issues, restrooms, right? What are we going to do about our restrooms? Physical education. There are some unique aspects to physical education. Music. There are some very unique aspects to music, and if you follow this every day in the papers like I do, you know that there have been some very dramatic outcomes where musical performances and rehearsals have spread this virus, and it has to do with the aerosol distribution. So that's something that music educators are talking about now, and people are researching right now. We don't have all the outcomes, and we're learning things as we go. That's something to think about. Athletics. The athletic community has been working very hard on what some of the possibilities are. We don't again know where we're going to be there. If you're interested in that, you can look at what the New York State Public High School Athletics Association has come up with in terms of the 6 options that they've come up with for how athletics might proceed. So that's something to consider. The cafeteria and lunches and breakfast, how we could do that while maintaining safety, a focus on safety. Assemblies, transportation, and field trips. All these are really important. Transportation is going to have its own separate subcommittee because of the challenges of transporting kids and trying to keep them separate and yet having a limited space, confined space in a bus. So all of these are going to be discussed further. We will have subcommittees, one for the middle high school, one for the elementary school, and one for transportation, trying to figure out how are we going to address these different items and different issues. And so then we'll see how that goes. The district committee will revisit the whole plan in a couple of weeks. So that's where we are in our reopening plan. That's a very short summary of something which obviously is a very big deal. Any questions or comments from you?
Seems like a lot of work, and it's very fluid. Just the transportation piece, separating children by a seat, and I don't know. It seems really complicated.
Yeah. Dana Wood and Josh Favreau are going to tackle that. They're going to lead the subcommittee on that. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll come up with some brilliant magic. It's, of course, a challenge, and you can kind of see how there are some limits. We don't know what the guidance is going to say. There are some states which have provided guidance that says you really need to separate kids a lot in the bus. Other states have said, no, you don't.
Yeah,
We're going to see what our guidance says.
How much? My question is, how much wiggle room do we have with these when we do get the guidance?
So, that's a good question. I think in reality, we have wiggle room. I think in reality, we need to make sure that we're interpreting all of that through the lens of our own school district, right? Because you're talking about guidance that's going to be provided for, say, big schools in Albany or New York City or Buffalo. And here we are in Lake Placid with fewer students district-wide than, some of those schools individually have. When they talk about density, they may be talking about 30 kids in a classroom, whereas here on average, we already have half of that density. So I think in a very practical sense, Liam, it's going to be adapted to our situation here. One last thing on a positive note, when we talk about kids coming back into the school buildings, actually this week we have students back in the school, and that is our extended school year program. I mentioned that to you before. It started off very well. It started yesterday with 4 students, and today we have 8 students. So it's a very, very small program. But when you haven't had students in a school since March, it sure is exciting to see kids and teachers getting together for teaching and learning.
Feel amazing.
Yeah, a big thank you to Sarah Allen, our CSE chair, for the organizational job that she's done, especially responding to the shifting winds of directives. You can do it, you can't do it. Yes, you can do it. And our entire ESY staff, they're really doing a terrific job at the start, and they're doing their best to make sure that this is a really successful summer for those students who they get to work with. So that's everything I have. Any additional comments or questions?
I'll just throw in that I mentioned this earlier to Roger, but we had a special BOCES board meeting this afternoon, and the topic of reopening schools came up, and I guess there was a meeting today which Roger couldn't be at, but he said there's just a elevated sense of frustration regarding the lack of direction from both the executive branch and also the educational branch of our government, New York State government. So he and other district superintendents from around this region will be meeting on Friday and coming up with some sort of plan to present to both the education department and the executive branch to see if they can't get this moving, so we're not in this liquid state for very much longer.
And I think that just illustrates how, in many ways, isolated I think different educators feel right now because we don't have those kinds of answers. Now, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's the organization, whatever it is tough. I know people ask me on a daily basis, what are we going to do? And I have to tell them, I don't know yet, because there's still a lot of things we're waiting on. And I think that's the position we're all in. So we'll bear with it. We'll do our best. We'll move forward. And then we'll adjust and adapt as things come out.
Well, I think you're being very proactive, Roger, you and the committees and the subcommittees, because you are preparing 3 scenarios that you can tweak at some point if you need to, but being proactive like you're doing while we're waiting for direction, I think thank you to all of you.
Thanks. All right, thanks for listening.
Okay, if there's nothing further, we'll go to information for the board. There are 3 items on the information. The Mizpah Summer Law Conference, which has changed this year from a full day to 2 half days on
We lost you.
Also, a donation document. If you have not taken the opportunity to read that, if you would, that will come up as a approval item, an item to be approved at another meeting.
I'd like to say congratulations to Tammy Morgan and kudos for your great work and your years of commitment to this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And then the third item is the job title for Dana Wood. This was brought up during a previous board meeting and is now being proposed. And hopefully you took the opportunity to read Roger's explanation for it and job titles and job descriptions. Any discussion on those three items? My only input on the job title is that we should somewhat formulate a plan for moving forward. If Dana moves on or moves out or moves up or moves somewhere out of his current position, how do we advertise for that? Do we advertise as a business manager or the assistant superintendent for finance, or do we leave it sort of like we did when Leonard got done and make that decision as we go along? So just in the discussions, maybe looking at that. Future board, most likely. We hope.
And I'm sorry. And Rick, I do want to, and Roger, I just wanted to clarify too, because I'm sure at some point someone may misinterpret the title to think that is the assistant superintendent of finance and support services. So I just want to clarify that it's not an assistant superintendent for the district that would take over for you, Roger. Is
No, none of that's related. It's just a title that matches the job description. Yeah. Yeah, I think if we want to dive into it earlier, I mean, that could be part of the process you're talking
right?
about.
No, that makes sense.
So we might want to, at the next meeting, plan
Sure.
out a way to discuss that and then go forward. I would suggest probably an executive session to do that.
Correct.
Yeah.
I will say that BOCES has turned to this model. We'll have shortly 2 assistant superintendents, assistant superintendents of finance and assistant superintendent of technology, perhaps. I'm not sure what it is, but it seems to be the model that's moving forth. So, any other discussion? If not, we'll move on to the capital project. There's the June 22nd contract status summary. Dana, or Roger, any updates you'd like to go over?
What is it? Which one are you bringing up, Rick?
Oh, I said there was
The
just
June 22nd.
Right, the attachment.
Yes.
The summary is there.
Right.
Also.
So I tried to provide you with some background information on a problem that occurred in the auditorium, and we're moving forward on it. But you can read some of the background there. Since I wrote that background for you, we did, under the guidance of our attorneys, provide both contractors with written notice and did ask to move forward with the repairs, but to recognize that the problem that emerged was contractor negligence, not a district additional cost. So we have our attorney, Bill Kissel, and his colleague involved in ensuring that we're making those statements appropriately. And so we're hoping to make, to move forward on all of that. I can talk more about it if you like. No, you're okay with that? Okay.
Oh, just a delay. what's this gonna do delay? Sorry, I can't get the doc on my phone. I'm just curious what.
Sure. So the problem that occurred happened during a big storm 2 weeks ago on the 22nd, and they were installing vents on the roof of the auditorium as part of the project, and then the holes were covered up, but they weren't covered up well, and so the storm allowed in a massive amount of water, and that caused damage in the auditorium and disrupted some of the material, which is going to lead to a asbestos abatement, another additional asbestos abatement project. So we have damage to the roof. We have damage to some plaster damage inside. There's some photographs in those documents. So when you take a look at the photographs. Nothing that can't be repaired. And then there's this abatement, but it's going to be fairly costly. And we just wanted to make sure that we were doing due diligence to protect the district from the additional cost by putting the contractors on notice that whoever was responsible for that to occur will need to, cover the cost for that either themselves or through their insurance companies. So I think we're addressing it well. We don't know how much of a delay it will lead to. We hope it doesn't lead to a delay because of some kind of organizational concerns about that. Any delay is really the additional work, we hope. So we're hoping it doesn't delay things too much, but without a doubt, there's going to be some delay here.
Thank you.
That's really disappointing.
Yeah.
Does that mean they get to cover the cost of the abatement?
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Dan?
Do they get to cover the cost of the asbestos abatement?
Well, that's what our notice says, is that we would expect that the responsible party would cover all the additional costs, the abatement, the repairs, and then the additional managerial costs that we've incurred. We have our construction managers involved. We have our architects involved. We have our attorneys involved, and those professional costs would also be included. Now, as you know, that's the statement that we are making. We do expect that it'll be followed, but that hasn't happened yet. Other than that, the construction project's going pretty well, making a lot of progress. And if you drive by and you see the wall is continuing to move its way towards Main Street. Among other projects, the offices in the elementary school are coming together very nicely. Dana, you want to make any other comments about the construction project?
Looks good.
Yeah, I mean, they have the fuel tank in, the boiler system at the middle high school is in as well. If you were to drive up, you'll see a new cement platform where the new tank is. So it's a 10,000 gallon tank. So that's nice. They're putting in the univents as well. So as Roger mentioned, they are definitely moving forward with a lot of the internal stuff.
And Dan, I think the across the street from your house, you're starting to see the entranceway to the elementary school start to look more and more together.
Yes, it looks great.
It does.
Any other questions or updates? Okay, moving right along, change orders. There are none at this time. Next item up is policy reviews. These are required on an annual basis, so we review them at this reorganizational meeting. They are the code of conduct, the investments, purchasing, attendance, and free and reduced price meal services. Any discussion, questions on those 5 policies?
The free and reduced lunch, are we any closer to being able to offer it to all students?
No. And the reason for that is the community eligibility option requires us to get 40% of students who are identified through their direct certifications. And so even though we are about at 40% for all students, the direct certification students make up only a smaller percentage of that. So we're not there yet, and we won't be there this year,
Okay.
which is too bad. We would like to take advantage of that.
Any other questions? Okay, action items. We have action items 9A through F are all under consent. Thank you. Then moving on to the minutes from the last board meeting, that also is consent. And so we'll move right into 11A, which is personnel matters. This is a teaching staff leave of absence. Recommended action is upon recommendation of the superintendent, grant the unpaid leave of absence for Jason Hubbard, special education teacher at the elementary school. The leave of absence is for the 2020-2021 school year. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen.
Second.
Second was Dan. Any discussion? If not, may I have a vote, please?
Yes.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-4 to 0 against. Go on to 12. Catch up with myself here. 12A and B, the BOCES are both consent. 12C is the Mizpah annual convention approval. The recommended action is whereas the Board of Education wishes to send up to 4 members of the Board of Education, including the superintendent, to the Mizpah annual convention in New York City, New York, on October 29th through the 31st, 2020, at the cost of $515 per person, plus travel expenses. Whereas monies have been budgeted for board members to attend conferences, now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby approves up to 4 people to attend the Mizpah annual convention in New York City, New York, on October 29th through October 31st, 2020, at the cost of $515 per person plus travel expenses. May I have a motion to approve this, please?
I'll make that
So
motion.
moved.
Thank you, Liam. Seconded, Martha.
Yep.
Second, Martha. Any discussion?
I wish that I could go. I really enjoyed the last conference, and it's a shame that COVID is affecting all these things.
Yeah, I was just about to say it, you may not be missing it, but with more as we come closer. Any
Do
other-
they have a contingency plan if it doesn't happen? Do we know? Will they do things online?
I filled out a survey. I don't know if anybody else got the survey that asked questions like, would you attend if it was virtual? What sections would you attend? And there is just a 9 or 10 questions. Did anybody else get that?
I did.
So,
I didn't, but it would be interesting if it was virtual. I think more people, especially the location of it, would be more apt to attend.
so we could all stay at Roger's house and have a
You're
sleepover.
absolutely.
Sounds like a great idea.
So, okay, if there's not any further discussion, may I please have a vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? 6-4-0 against, the motion passes. The cell phone approval was on the consent, as was the special education. And due to the cause, I didn't hear anything ding in, so I think we're all set there. On to discussion items. Committee appointments. You have the, let me get there. The policy manual and policies regarding committees are listed for you there. There's also a list of active committees that was an attachment. And you have highlighted those that need addressing, Karen? Is that how I read these?
Yes,
Okay.
but I think that the audit committee, because you and Dan are president and vice president. We just need to know if they're gonna be on it still.
Colleen, are you still interested in the health and safety?
Probably not. It's just difficult for me to get there at the time of the day that those meetings are.
Okay. Is anybody else interested in that committee?
That's the building and grounds.
Buildings and
committee, right?
grounds,
Yeah.
yes. Health and safety for buildings and grounds. And that meets 3 p.m. on Thursdays.
Jeff's been on that one. right?
Jeff is on it, correct.
And Liam's been on that?
Liam, were you on that committee?
Yeah, I was on it. I just had trouble making the times.
Okay. So we'll ask Jeff, and if anybody else is interested, I'll stay on that. I wasn't very good at attending, but I will be this year. My commitment will be there. Shared decision-making committee. That really didn't do much, so I think we'll let that one ride, and if that decides to surface again, we'll put people on it. But that's about it, isn't it?
Policy. Is
Policy.
Yeah.
And Joan and Martha, are you still okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Was Colleen on that?
Colleen, were you on policy?
I
No,
think initially, but then I bumped over to the other one.
Okay.
Okay.
Martha, are you all set with policy? You okay?
yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Need any more, Karen, or is that fulfill the requirements?
Right.
Great, thank you. Next item is setting objectives for the next school year. I was trying to rack my brain with how we did this last year, and I think we just what it stated here, we just sent it out on Google Docs, and we added our suggestions on what elements should be under each of these goals. These are somewhat important. Our superintendent has aligned his goals for next year with consideration for these 6 goals. So it's important that we get these done and that they're realistic, and we'll hold them accountable. So
I think the board did a great job last year with establishing the goals. And that's one reason why I thought you and I both agreed that it would be good to align the superintendent's goals with the board goals. So whatever process we did last year, I would imagine others think the same way that I did. I just observed the board worked really well together to put together successful goals.
is that the call, Karen? That's pretty much what we did, didn't we?
Yeah,
We
we just put on a Google Doc. Yeah.
put the 2019-20 plan, and then,
Yeah.
okay. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yes,
So that,
though we may only have one goal, and that is to survive and thrive in this pandemic. So
Excellent.
would
Well,
that
we'll
be
get
under
that.
leadership, technology, or finance?
yeah, I think it's going to be all of them. Yeah, I think it's just going to cover it all. Yeah, make it real simple for everybody.
So Karen, do you have any idea when you could put that out?
I'll do it before the end of the week.
Okay, so it'll be out before the end of the week. Let's plan on reviewing that, our next meeting, which is on the 21st of July, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So let's plan on reviewing it then. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I do have all your addresses. I will hunt you down if you haven't contributed to that, okay?
Yes.
Just so you know. Okay,
Good luck.
I have fireworks left over.
I was waiting for the firework joke.
Any other discussion on the goals?
Can you all get in your Lake Placid CSD.net email?
I can. I'm constantly being prompted to change my password, but
I could try. I mean, I've had trouble getting in the past. That's all I'll say. If there's a Gmail account, I don't know, but
When I get it on the Google Doc, I'll send you all a text and then you can, if you can't get in, just respond.
okay, thank you.
Yes,
Okay, not to Joe.
no, I'll take
Okay.
care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, meeting location and date for our next meeting. This is the adjournment phase. It will be, the next meeting is July 21st. The location, Karen handed me hot off the press this morning that the executive order 20248 will expire on midnight of August 4th. So on August 5th, board meetings are to be conducted in person once again. So with that in mind, we'll, if you so desire, which we discussed at the last meeting, we'll keep the 21st virtual. And then
Okay.
on our next meeting after that, which will, I believe is August 11th, if I
Yep.
recall, will be live. And we can discuss location on that. I know, Roger, you offered up the cafeteria
On the
or
library.
just to add distance. So any comments or confusion, discussion on that?
Are we gonna be able to keep the like secure the library, so that it's people can't wander the high school?
I don't know. Hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I just can't remember. I like it that the board meetings are separate from the school in some ways.
Mhm.
it might be hard though, if we have anybody, it might be hard to social distance with all of the board members and any community members that we might have show up in the current boardroom.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's just my thought. I'm whatever. But whatever let's do what we got to do. I was just wondering if there's a way. Yeah, that was just my footnote. Is there a way
That's
to
good.
direct traffic? Yeah, because
So we'll,
Probably the only way to do that at this, in the middle and high school would be to have the meeting in the gymnasium, because you can lock the doors to prevent people from going upstairs. But once you're in the main building, there's really no way to prevent
Yeah.
people from moving around.
so possibly the gymnasium. Okay. Just to think about, because we don't know if it's airborne and you got people wandering in the school and then is it going to be there? Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like you gotta keep it separate. I have no idea though. I'm just a layman in this. It just,
And will we all be wearing masks, and will we ask the community if they come in to wear masks when they're in there?
I certainly hope so.
because there'll be times when you cannot social distance when you're entering or exiting. And I know at least in the healthcare environment, you're masked when you're coming or going. Once you get settled, not unlike the restaurant industry, once you're settled, you can then remove your mask. But if you're mobile, then you're wearing a mask. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that my teachers in the classrooms, we have to wear masks all day long. The students don't, it's optional, but our teachers have to, even once they're settled in the rooms.
yeah, it's just a crazy thought.
I have to wear one all day in my house
You
Yeah,
do.
and in my backyard.
yeah. I'll be wearing mine.
But when the last kid leaves, you can take it off and you're fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we could ask maybe like the horse show or something like that. They have that long unused building right now.
That's
I
a good
mean,
idea.
there's lots of community options, I think.
I think so too.
So,
Yeah, we can look into that.
Okay, we'll look into it and we'll bring it to the meeting on the 21st so that everybody is comfortable.
Also, on the 21st, you talked about doing an executive session. Will you do that first? Will you do it early or at the end?
What's your input, Roger, on that? Before or after?
Will it be a short one or a long one?
I think it'd be a short one. Right?
It'd be a typical summer meeting, which is relatively short.
I
This
meant the
reorganization
executive
meeting used to go till
session.
9:15 or
Yeah,
so.
right.
So,
Yeah. I think if the process is executive session next meeting followed by action the meeting after, it doesn't matter whether it's beginning or end. If you wanted to act next meeting, then you have it in the beginning and then you act later.
And this is on the title change, correct?
Correct.
So it'd be nice, because next meeting is the budget status
Mhm.
and finance report. So why don't we plan on it last? And that way Dana can bow out. And
Yeah, that sounds good.
is that okay with you, Dana?
Then how would you vote on the position after you do it last?
Okay, we'll put that on later.
Yeah, we'll put it on the next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. There's no old agenda items on my,
Just the dashboard.
just that, yeah, the dashboard, that we've got to handle that soon.
I just realized this is one of the few meetings that Dana hasn't said a word.
Yeah.
Dana, can you recite something for us?
Sure. What would you like me to recite?
I will work with Dana in the next couple of weeks on my idea for the dashboard so it can be dealt with.
Okay, great. New agenda items, we will be taking up, Martha, your suggestion, which I like, with the super eval and having it a working document. And Karen's looked into it a bit, and I'm going to be speaking with Jason Brockway from Salmon River, as I know Salmon River uses theirs as a working document. So I'll see how exactly they do it. And then we'll discuss that, hopefully next meeting. Any other new agenda items?
No, I'm good.
If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. May I have the
Yes.
motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joan. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
6-4-0 against, the motion passes. Thank you very much and appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank
And
you.
Karen and Roger.
Thank you.
See everybody.
Are we gonna play?
You. Take care.
Yeah.
Dan,
Dan,
can
you want to stay on?
Sure.
And anybody else who wants to, that's fine.